Welcome to This Is Not Advice, and I'm Roy Bahat, and I'm a startup investor in the future of work, and we have a little role reversal today because Caroline, who has been in the asking me questions place before, I think we first met when you were at Fortune, maybe, I don't know exactly, but today we're here, day 107. Caroline is at LinkedIn, where she hosts LinkedIn News Live, and she's got a newsletter called Working Together about equity in the workplace. You can correct me if I got any of that wrong. And we're going to ask about a parenting related question today, which is how do I set expectations with my teammates if I'm a work from home parent? And I'd love to hear about it in the context of a new parent, which is like, okay, you're having your second or third kid, you've already got you've worked out some detente, presumably, but for people who are new parents, what should they expect and think about?
Great. Well, Roy, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's great to sit down with you. And it's also great to be on the other side, a little less pressure on asking the questions, but being able to answer them. I really appreciate it. I think it's really important to start with the data. We did a survey earlier on in the pandemic just to tap in to see how working parents are really doing right now. And a whopping 60% of working parents told us that their employer is making no accommodations to their schedule right now to make sure that work works for them during this super challenging time. That surprised me. And I know as a talent expert, Roy, that's probably alarm bells in your head. If employers aren't getting this right now and aren't saying to their working parents, which, by the way, huge talent pool of great talent right now, that they can't change their hours or make things work given the childcare necessities right now, that's a crazy number to me.
I agree. That's a crazy number to me too. We'll get to the expectations in a second. I'll just say I've heard about it from founders who we've backed and others, both in terms of their personal experience as parents and for people on the team, but also it comes up with this awkward thing of like, well, some folks have tried to make some special accommodation for parents. And then it's like, well, why should the parents get to do X, Y, Z? And so it just raises a lot of workplace issues where one of the myths of the workplace is that once we walk in the door, we're all on a level playing field in a sense. I mean, we may have different rules, but like enough of our personal differences are abstracted away that we can collaborate. But of course, if you never walk in the door, then we don't really have a rule book quite for what do you do.
And I mean, there was no rule book when this pandemic started. That was, you think about the number one perk that workers were asking for, particularly working mothers were asking for prior to the pandemic, flexibility, working from home. Well, that happened in spades at the beginning of this pandemic, but because it happened just overnight and companies didn't think about it. And we know from survey data and we know from the number 1.6 million working mothers are not in the workforce today that would have been if this pandemic hadn't have happened. And that's because companies still haven't figured this out. So back to the original question, I think that that's just a really good thing to know is that when you're having a conversation with your manager, it's not like there's a rule book, like you said, that they're following. And so this is really a case-by-case basis situation where managers have to be cognizant. They need to create almost individual rule books for individual employees during this time.
And so you've got this. So it's interesting because the survey is in a way the perspective of the company. I mean, it's the individual's perspective of the company not taking care of them. Let's assume your company has made no accommodation, nothing, different. And you're aware of that. You're aware of the fact that your situation is not unique. Therefore, you have in you the strength of knowing you may need to ask. What do you ask for? Like, what are the expectations that you might set, or what are the requests you might make? Like, what are some practical things parents, especially new parents, can do? And I'll also just say, as a dad, I am aware of the fact that this is different for dads and moms in lots of ways. And so if you want to answer it from the perspective of mom, whatever you think is most relevant, I'd love to hear what the individual should do.
Well, Laura, I need the viewers to know that I am not a parent of a human baby right now. I do have a 9-month-old puppy named Larry, which I'm not going to try to equate to an actual human child, but I have spoken and heard on LinkedIn from hundreds of working mothers and spoken to experts about this. So just want to say I don't have kids right now. And so I do empathize and have a lot of empathy for the women and men on my team who are navigating this. But I think, look, in terms of having a concrete conversation with your manager about how you can get through this, it really depends on if now, say it's November, and like LinkedIn, we're not going to be back in the office until July. So the short-term conversations that maybe you were having, the start and stop of like, this is how I'm going to get through the week that your manager and you have been figuring out. Now it's time to switch to a long-term game plan. And that really depends, like I said, what's going on the ground with you. I have colleagues who are in New York. I relocated to Sun Valley, Idaho for this part of the pandemic, but I have my colleagues back in New York, and every day they wake up and they're wondering if the schools are going to be open. And so I think it's two things. I think it's as much as possible figuring out a long-term plan that will work for your childcare needs, whether that's, you have a nanny that you're potting up with right now, you lost your nanny, and then explaining to your manager how you're going to get work done in a way that works for your team and works for them, but also candidly works for you. Because if it doesn't work for you, it's not going to work for anyone else, and the team is going to suffer and the company is going to suffer. So I would come with a pretty specific plan of, look, I actually can't be online from 11 a.m. to 1 because Derek has a virtual learning, let's say.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to restructure my day so that my team can get me during other specific hours, something like that.
You've got to not just raise the issue, but also come up with the solution and propose it. I've seen that, by the way, so many times in other settings. Like, it reminds me, one of my first jobs, I was a management consultant. It was very painful. And that's what
my husband does, by the way, Roy. So I can attest, very, very painful.
He's gone Monday to, or was gone Monday to Thursday. Maybe now he's back. And we had all these issues with the junior people on the team that you couldn't really reliably predict when your workday would be over. So if you wanted to go to dinner with a friend or go on a date, you couldn't do it. But then this one person I worked with, he was like, yeah, next Thursday I've got a date at 8 p.m. And it was like, okay, like, I guess the water will just have to flow around that obstacle that he put there, which is fine. And so it's reminding me of an adult parenting version of that. And I think that's really, really good, crisp, concrete, not advice.
Yeah, I feel like, going back to the fact that there is no playbook for what's happening right now in the world of work, and managers are having to kind of create individual playbooks for individual employees, it's a little unfair for you as the employee to go to your manager and just because, okay, yes, we're all now seeing each other's kids in the backgrounds and puppies, and there's chaos, and we do feel a little bit more connected to our teammates and to our managers during this time. But the reality is they don't have a full picture into what's going on in your world. And so you need to give them as transparent a picture of what is happening on the ground for you so that they can set you up for success. Because again, if you're struggling, if you're constantly late to meetings, if you're hectic and you're not able to brainstorm effectively, that's not good for anyone. And so going and saying, and sharing as much as you're comfortable and saying, this is the situation on the ground and this is my plan, is I think the best plan forward. But
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Caroline.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is all so easy to say, right? But like I said, there is still so much uncertainty in the day-to-day, and particularly those, like we were talking about, parents with very young children. So school's closed tomorrow, the playbook that you had long-term, you're going to have to rip it up again and figure out how you're going to just get through the next 72 hours. So I think that's really where the tension is, why we're seeing 1.6 million fewer working mothers in the workforce right now, is because of that back and forth of we know, we don't know, we know, we don't know. Let's make a plan. Let's rip up the plan.
Yeah, and then like in situations of uncertainty, you default to prioritizing the thing you care about more, which I hope for parents is their children. Right. And speaking of which, I've got my son coworker here. The thing that brings up for me is also that there is a timing and dosage consideration, and I'm curious if you agree with this, in how definitively you state it, because we've all seen people say like, need X. And then it's like, well, if a month later X changes, you also have to be aware as the parent that not all of your asks are set in stone because you yourself are making it up as you go along.
Right, exactly. And I think, flipping this a little bit to be less advice, not advice for the employee. But if you think about this from the manager and the employer's perspective, I was just speaking to the CEO of the Institute for Women's Policy Research. There's so much research that shows that if managers don't take the time to create these playbooks, to keep these people in the workforce, to keep them happy and productive, the cost of retraining, rehiring, the cost of losing them is just going to be so vast. When you think about that as scale, as this pandemic continues, this is just something that managers have to figure out right now how to get right.
Amen. I love that. We should do the manager side of this question another day. For today, I think we have dispensed enough not advice with Caroline Fairchild from LinkedIn News. And thank you for joining us. And I would love if you would come back and propose other questions that we should tackle, or we can return the favor another way. And meanwhile, if anybody watching now or later has questions they want us to tackle, we do this pretty much every day. So
thank you so much, Roy. Great talking to you.